Welcome to Aging Well in America. I'm Anne Marie Gattari, your host. Every day, 10,000 people turn 65 years old in the United States. Today, there are 5.5 million people aged 85 or older. By the year 2050, that number will grow to 20. 20 million people will be aged 85 or older. Are we ready? Is America ready? There's so much good work going on around the world, around the country, and right here in our own community. In fact, some of the people doing some of those good works are in it for the fun, and we have with us today one of those people, John Clor. Hi, John.
Hey, thanks.
Welcome. Auto
great to be here.
historian, author, host of your own car show.
Yeah, I'm on WMTV with Cars in Context. It's just a lot of fun, and
Yep.
we're in the Motor City. Why can't we do something about
exactly,
cars?
exactly.
And your long history with the automotive industry, it's just a great, wonderful industry to be in.
Everyone is touched in this area by
Yes.
cars one way or another.
Mhm.
And you know, as I was thinking about a show about cars, of course I had to think of my dad, who was 90 when he died 3 years ago, was you know, in 1920s he got his first car.
Wow.
He was, as he liked to call himself, an alley mechanic, and literally was, I remember him always underneath a car in our garage growing up. That wasn't his profession, but it should have been, because he would have been a great auto engineer. But there are a lot of people in that age group, in that cohort, maybe they're in their 70s, 80s, who have a love and a draw to autos that is lifelong and is very, very important. And something I think as they do reach the final years of their lives can make a big difference, and something we as their adult children should really embrace and help them.
We need to help them celebrate that, because I think, and unlike young people today who have a lot of other things that captivate them,
Yes.
because their world is a different
Yes.
world. Our parents were captivated by the automobile because it changed their lives.
That's right.
And many of them, when they were young, saw the birth of the automobile go from the Great Gatsby era of just rich people having cars to everyman, thanks to Henry Ford and the assembly line and the Model T. Those cars became accessible, changed the way our parents felt about freedom and their mobility and their ability to, if they want to go somewhere and take up roots and go to another town or explore this state or this country, they love the automobile. So they have an affection for the automobile that I don't think any other generation does. And I think that's why when they celebrate it, when they love to drive.
That's
They're the
right.
most, well, you know, they're the most driving part of our society, and
That's right.
and they also love to celebrate that freedom by being involved in the car hobby. So that's why when you talk about, you know, car clubs, and it's all seniors are running all this stuff.
Right.
The young people they're hard to get involved.
Before we get into the fun stuff like the car clubs, and this is the season, as we know, that serious issue about driving as you're aging, and when should you not drive any longer, and who's the one to take away the keys?
Good.
I know you've had lots of people ask you about that, just because of your closeness to the industry.
Well, it was something that fascinated me as a little boy, because our neighbor, when I was a little boy growing up in Detroit on the east side, we had a neighbor who had an old Cadillac, and I've always liked that old Cadillac. And as he got to be in his 80s and 90s, we saw him not driving as well, because we were little kids playing in the street, and we noticed that. And one day he came home with a mailbox underneath his car and didn't know it.
Was dragging
He was
it.
dragging it, and so my father was a Detroit police officer, and he went over there and he tried to talk to this gentleman, saying, you know, they're gonna come want their mailbox back, and are you having a problem? Well, it turns out he had a vision problem, and you know, he was getting up in years. And my father, as the neighbor, was the first person that talked to him. His kids never talked to him about his driving. And then when I got to work for Auto Week for the years ago, we used to do, back then it was 52 covers a year. So we looked at different things that car magazines would look at. And one of our covers was called Too Old to Drive. And this was, Anne Marie, this was back in the early 90s. We were tackling this issue because it started
And there
to be,
were many fewer people
yeah.
in that cohort, but
And now
And
it's
now
it's a national news.
common issue.
Right, and when are you too old to drive? I don't think there's an age. I think people kind of know. I know seniors who are really good drivers.
Right.
And I remember talking to one analyst, and he worked in the insurance industry, and he told me that seniors actually have pretty good driving records when you look at them on the tables. And someone pointed out something, said that they don't get in accidents; they just cause them.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
and they they're all the jokes.
Yeah.
The guy, the blue hairs in the left
Yeah,
lane with their
right,
turn
right.
indicator on for a mile.
Right.
It's an awareness, is what it is. And I don't think that as a senior driver, you really are aware that your skills may be diminished. You may, because it's a gradual thing.
That's right.
Just like everything else in your
Right.
life, I don't think they have that awareness. So it's up to the children. Maybe it's a neighbor who are aware, because it's not just you're trying to do them a favor. It's a safety issue.
That's
Anne Marie.
right.
I mean, people don't realize that when you see on the news that a senior didn't remember which was the gas or the brake and drove through a store window, for example. We think it's, how could that happen? Well, because these are the kinds of challenges they face.
Right.
And until you are willing to step in, either as a family member or as a concerned person, that'll continue. They don't usually stop themselves.
Right. And even if their skill is still, their technical driving skill may not have been diminished, those with dementia, forgetting where they're going and ending up somewhere where they didn't intend to go, that is a very serious issue. I know in my own business, I have had adult children call me and say, it's time that we get some assistance in their home, some home caregiving, because of the driving issue.
Sure.
Often a doctor may step in, right, and say it's time to take away the keys.
Ooh, that's a tough thing to say.
That's a really tough one.
It's not good.
But you and I were speaking earlier, and sometimes if you just listen to your parent, they may be giving you clues. There was a time or two I remember, and my dad, he was the proudest driver. Nobody could drive that. No one could get in the driver's seat of his Lincoln.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
But there was a time or two when I would go over and, I was going to take him somewhere in my car, and he said, we'll take the Lincoln, but why don't you drive?
Wow.
And I think that was him
That's a
telling me,
Just trying to get
I know that I need some assistance. And you were saying that that's one thing adult children might do, is invite their parent to drive.
Yeah, I think
then
that
really assess.
Let's talk about an adult child who comes over, visits mom and dad
Sure.
occasionally. That's, I think, where we make a disconnect. Since we're not there all the time, we come to visit them. We're not aware of their driving habits. I know what we talked with Liz Aiken on her show in a Heartbeat about what are some of the signs. Well, have you taken a look at your parents' car recently? Is there a big scrape down the side of it where they ran against the faucet coming into the garage, or is it starting to show damage where their vision or their reaction times, or maybe the bumpers are getting knocked up? If you don't look at the car, you'll never know.
Right.
And the other thing is, when we talked about how do you address the issue? How do you know how well or how poorly they're starting to drive? You don't know unless you experience it. So when the next time you come over, rather than say, hey mom, hey dad, let's go out to dinner, I'll drive, why don't you guys drive? I'd like to see the old car. How's it running? Let's try it. And if they say, like your father said, I'd rather not drive, that might be a red flag. If they say, okay, let's go, drive with them. Be observant. Don't be the backseat driver.
Right.
Because that's one reason they don't want to drive with you.
Exactly.
And then you'll make some observations
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
own, whether they're, and it's not just, the skill set anymore. It's, do they know how to get to where
Right.
the stores here, the restaurants
Right.
there? Do they ask you a lot of questions? Are they distracted? Do they look nervous
Right.
with you in the car? Because I think that's the first sign. And then the tough part is like, okay, who says what? How do we address this issue? Because the last thing your parents want to do is give up their keys, because A, they don't want to bother you to come over and take them to doctor's appointments or to the grocery store. And B, when they give that up, they feel older. They feel bad about their life. And you don't want that to happen. So you have to be tactful, I think, when
Sure. And there are community resources and experts out there. Your parents' doctor is the first go-to person. home care agencies are another that could assist, and even just calling somebody, an automotive journalist like yourself who has had a lot of discussions and experience with this.
You need to look at it, and I think the other part, some people have a family intervention. Other siblings don't want to be involved with, and as you know, some siblings are more involved with their parents than others. Some may have moved away or they're not as interested.
That's right.
Or some have a more difficult time dealing with that. So,
Yeah.
and then there's always a leader in the sibling group. So someone who needs to sit down and say, you know, Mom, have you noticed Dad or Mom and
Right.
Dad are not
Right.
driving the same? Sit down with them and talk to them. You know, we're kind of concerned. Maybe, well, let's do this. We'll come over a little more often, and we'll take you to the, you know, it might take a bigger sacrifice on the family's part. Or maybe we'll have a service come and help you get there, because, you know, driving's a hassle, and you don't have to put all the blame on them. You're getting, you know, maybe it's more dangerous to drive, you know, texting and driving, you know, driving is real difficult, and a lot of people now, as you get older, are they nervous to get on the freeway? Are those kinds of, because they'll only take side streets home. Are they staying off of Mack Avenue? You know, those are all signs, and if you can't address it, I agree. Talk to a doctor, because, you know, I think it is, they like to listen to authority.
That's right.
They respect authority.
That's
right.
right.
The generation that does.
Yeah, the child is often the last one that they listen to.
Yeah.
So now, let's say that they have, well, they may or may not have had to stop driving, but nevertheless they are a true car lover. And what are some of the fun things that they can get involved in? Let's say if they don't drive, but they just want to be part of the car scene in the spring and summer in
I
Detroit.
love the fact that, you know, I'm involved a lot with car clubs and the whole hobby, and I think that the more I'm involved with it, the more I'm seeing that really seniors are, not only do they own the most property and they own the most business, that they have most of the money. You know, seniors, this generation is running America still, whether
right.
our kids want to believe it or not.
That's right.
And my own parents, before they passed, were very certain to tell me that, you know, they were very aware of what they wanted to do with their free time. And I think that cars, being in Detroit, it's a lot of fun for them. Now, for the wives who may not, they may not be involved because they care about the mechanics so much. They just love to take the drives. Driving as a pleasure, rather than driving because you have to get there. You know, we're talking about the time of autonomous driving cars.
Sure.
To me, that's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
Because there is a joy, I think, in driving.
Yeah.
And my wife and I will take a Sunday drive to go out to the apple orchard, or we'll go, you know, up to the Thumb area.
Right.
Those to us is an enjoyment. To my children, oh, I have to drive.
Right.
Can you get somebody else to drive? You know.
How long till we're there?
Yeah, are we there yet? I kind of blame, I had an auto journalist on, a friend of mine, who we tried to get to the bottom of why is that. And he blamed the parents who allowed kids to look at their little TV screens all the way up north. For us, did you ever play the telephone pole game or the license plate game, or
sure.
name that car?
Yeah.
We were amazed how different the countryside was than the city of Detroit.
Right.
So for us, I think for our seniors, they recall the joy of driving. So being able to go on a cruise, a lot of places have cruises, a lot of clubs have, you know, an outing to go to a museum, driving out to the Gilmore in Kalamazoo. What a fabulous museum we have in Michigan. Yeah, and it's a wonderful day's drive. Those kinds of things, even if you just go to Dearborn and take the Rouge tour.
Sure, absolutely.
Those kinds of things we can still
Henry
enjoy. And I
Ford
think our
Museum.
parents would enjoy them too.
So if you don't have an old car, you like to drive but you can't, how does one get involved in one of the weekend cruises that we see happening almost
everywhere?
Yeah, simultaneously on the weekends.
Well, let's say, okay, you don't
Telegraph
have an antique car, you don't have something old, but you still would like to do something like that. You can get online, or have your children get online. You can talk to friends that are in the hobby that you know have an old car, and they have a car club. You don't have to own an old car take be in a car club.
Oh,
a lot of people think, oh, I got to have
that's
a.
news.
Yeah, you don't have to own it.
Okay.
These clubs are dedicated to the enjoyment. So it's fun to go to the meetings, and you'll meet a couple or an old friend or maybe a new friend
Yeah.
that has an old car that, oh, I like that. My dad or my sister had that. And you'll get to know they're going to the A&W this weekend. This weekend they're going on a country cruise. This one they're going to a museum. And it's so easy to get involved. And you know what? A lot of these people love to have the 4-place cars, even a convertible, so you can ride it with friends. So this is where you get new friends. You get to enjoy the
That's a
hobby,
great
even without
idea.
a car.
So what are some of the car clubs they should be looking? What are some of the websites?
Well, depending on what make or model you have, you know, if you have a General Motors product or say a Ford or a Chrysler, the easiest way to get the information is go to the museums, like the Walt B. Chrysler had museums, but go online and find out. All right, let's say you're a Corvette fan and you join the local Corvette club here. They do a lot of things. Moxum is a club called Mustang Owners Association of Southeast Michigan.
Oh, for heaven's
They have
sake.
800 members, and they do things every week. And you can go to their once a month, go to a meeting, hang out, and have fun, and find out. You know what? There are so many other people in this hobby. It's and for the seniors, they're the ones that have a little bit of that extra time to help run things.
Yeah. Now, let's say you have an old car in your garage that you've been intending to work on for years and years.
Are you talking about me? I do have one of those.
And you are a senior citizen who may or may not have the means, and I don't mean necessarily just the financial means, but now you're not driving, so you don't have transportation. You might need some help with getting, with some of the mechanics. What ideas do you have for them, John?
Well, my brother he's a car nut, and he knew a senior who was a phenomenal source of information on old Thunderbirds. He was so much so that when he was in his 50s and retired from the auto companies, he moved to Arizona and started a business. Well, when he met him at a car show, he decided that this man knew so much and he had a terminal illness, and he said, he's getting out of the business. He wanted to spend some time alone, and he said, could I come to your shop? And he didn't move around as well. He said, could I come to your shop and help you for free? And at first he thought that was strange. Why would someone want to work for free? It was because our seniors who are in the business or the hobby have so much knowledge. Sometimes they can't work on their old cars anymore. Sometimes they're just sitting in the garage. And it would be nice if someone would come to them and say, you know what, I'd like to know a little bit more. How did you learn about all these things? My brother wanted to know his knowledge about this one particular engine that they don't make anymore. And he was amazed at what this man knew, because Anne Marie, he took these things apart and put them back together over and over again for years. So you know what? It really helped this man. He was divorced, and he lived alone, and he made a new friend, and I really think it helped him live longer and had a more enjoyable life, to get a friend to share his passion, have a younger person come in and help. So if you know a young person that loves the cars and loves the hobby, wants to learn about them, there's no better source of knowledge than a
So
car
if
fan.
you're the adult child of somebody in this situation who has something to give in terms of knowledge and maybe even an old vehicle and could use some help, and not to mention companionship, what advice do you have for that adult child to get that information out there to someone like you who might be able to match people?
I think the best thing for them to do, if they'll know that their parents either was very active in the hobby at one time, maybe they do have an old car that they just can't work on anymore, to get themselves to get involved in the local car club of that brand.
Okay.
Another one is a lot of schools have outreach programs. Young people have to do service time.
Like an auto mechanics class?
They would love, can you imagine an auto class, a teacher saying, you know what, we know this guy that's got an old Buick or an old whatever, and we're going to go over to his house and help him get it running again.
Oh, how fabulous.
They would learn, first of all, interacting with the
Yes.
senior, knowing what he knows
Yes.
about the old cars. Auto classes are just getting a lot of late model cars that they fix up and
Yes.
put in a car show. This would be a great way for them to be involved with the seniors in their community.
Yeah.
And what a blessing it would be for this senior to be able to sit with a couple of young mechanics and show them.
So I guess what we're doing is we're putting a call out there to
Yeah.
the adult children to make some calls on your parents' behalf, either the local school district, the high school, a car club, and they're easy to find online.
All over the place. Google them.
And then just through word of mouth.
Yeah, if you have friends that are involved in the hobby, you know, that's the other part. You know, in this town, we pretty much we know somebody that's involved. You know, that's the way this town is. And I think it'll help in another way, and that's to sometimes if you're not getting over to your parents' house often enough, to get them new friends. It's hard for them to make new friends. They see their old friends passing.
Yeah.
And it's hard for them to get out and make new friends. This would be a great way to use a great thing that's part of the Motor City heritage and get them out and meet new people.
Absolutely. Another quick story about my dad. So when we finally convinced him to accept some outside care, it was a young man who came over who had home care experience. My dad didn't want anything to do with him until the guy, his name was Mike, he looked in the garage and saw the 94 Lincoln and made a comment about it, and then they were like this. They did some of that, no, not anything that was serious working on it, but Mike did help my dad with just by having that interest in cars, and next thing you know, he was fixing a...
You know, it works conversely. I know someone in St. Clair Shores who has an old Thunderbird, a young guy, and he wants to restore it, and he didn't know anything about it. He was asking me for advice, and did you know that his neighbor, when he pushed it out of his garage, his neighbor saw it, and he didn't realize his neighbor was an old mechanic, hadn't talked to his neighbor that much. He was just an older gentleman that they just waved to, and now he comes over and gives him some mechanical advice because he used to do that. And he said, if it weren't for me pushing that old car out of the garage,
you never would have known.
No, I would just, hi neighbor, and the senior would have never, now they're best of friends. And it would have been just, and that's the kind of thing, I think, that just one little sharing of information, just sharing some knowledge, it's a great thing.
It really is.
And, you know, it'll help the senior too if he sees, well, you know, these cars are getting older, I'm getting older. Maybe they'll go to the store together and let the young guy drive. It's not, giving up the keys is so tough, but still being able to enjoy your car every once in a while, that's all you got to make sure that they have that ability.
Yeah, right.
Get them out there.
Get them out there. I mean, I don't think we can emphasize enough what a positive community interaction is built all around our industry.
You know, one of the original guys who designed the Mustang was a man named Joe Oros, and he had severe Alzheimer's. He moved to California, and I was able, before he passed away, I talked to his caregiver because he was a hero of mine. And I said, what does Joe like to do? She said, well, he's difficult to move around, but he has an old Mustang, because he designed the car, and we will put him in the convertible, and we'll drive around out in Santa Barbara. He just liked to get out and do that. Even at his advanced disease, could find some joy in this once passion of his. And I thought, that it was a really cool thing for a caregiver to do. And for me, that's just, people that are caregivers, getting them out and even though it's hard to get them in the car with walkers and all that stuff, getting them mobile is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep them rolling.
So what's coming up? What are some of the big shows that we should be looking for?
Well, Grosse Pointe has their new car show, but everything in Detroit kind of centers back and forth of Woodward. The Dream Cruise is big. Here on the east side, we have a Gratiot cruise. We have a Harper cruise. On the west side, there's a Michigan Avenue cruise. There's a Telegraph cruise. There's even a cruise now on Hines Drive in the summer, and I've done that one as well.
Now, are those the ones that pretty much happen just virally weekly by themselves?
You'll see them on television. You can Google them. You'll see when they happen. You don't need any, you can run what you brung. They can just don't bring your minivan and hang out the window. Just bring some kind of fun old car. Even if you buddy up with someone, they're a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people. I know the Hines Drive one is a picnic day. The Gratiot cruise, you go up to Mount Clemens and you turn around. It's a good chance to go to the restaurant, go out to eat. It's just good fun. I don't think there's a lot of places in the country that are like Detroit that we celebrate the cars. I mean, we should because we're the Motor City, but I think call mom and dad up. Don't just go to the Gratiot cruise. Call mom and dad up and say, put the top down.
Yeah.
You know, if their hat blows off, buy them another one.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is the time of year. It starts right about in early June, and it goes through the end of August, even through into September. Almost every weekend there's a car show or a cruise, so be active.
Yeah, that's terrific. What's one of your favorite stories about a local car show?
Well, I remember when I bought an old Mustang. I had it fixed up. I worked so hard on the car. I finally got it running, and I took it to a car show, and I was so pleased because I knew it was a very rare one, very rare color. And I pulled into this car show, and I was just beaming. I finally got this car done, and it's running great. And guess what pulled next to me? The exact year, the exact color. The thing was identical, only the difference was this guy had bought the car new. He didn't restore it, and he had bagged the car, and it would only had like a couple thousand miles on
wow.
it. It was a 70s
Okay.
era, and I thought, what are the odds of that happening?
My goodness.
I mean, it's just, this is the cool thing about the hobby. When we became friends, obviously.
Yeah.
If there were only 2 cars like this in the country, he parked right next to me during a car show. My wife, she went out and she said, there's a lot of guys with these expensive cars, and they spend thousands of dollars.
Right.
So you know what she bought to take to a car show? She paid $2,000. She bought a 1980 Pinto station wagon.
All right, love it, love it. What's your favorite car of all time? Model year?
Well, I really love the early Mustangs. 68 Shelby would be my favorite.
Okay.
Another ones I really like on the Mustangs are the, and I hate to bring up the Charlie's Angels years because that Mustang was not well loved, but I love the Mustang IIs, the little cars. And of course, everybody loves a split window Corvette. And for me, if I had one car to buy, it would be a 1960 Thunderbird convertible. It's 4 places, so I could take my senior neighbors with me as well.
Oh,
great cars, and of course it's a great city to enjoy them in.
Yeah, and I've got to mention my 1967 Buick LeSabre that I was telling you
The big
about
gold
earlier.
LeSabre.
The big gold LeSabre I bought used from my brother in 1974, drove it to Wayne State, got 9 miles to the gallon.
That's when gas was cheap and cars were big.
John, thanks so much
My
for
pleasure.
joining us. We've come to another end. A lot of great ideas. It's just uplifting conversation. I really appreciate it. We've come to another end of Aging Well in America. Please send us your ideas, issues, topics you'd like us to address, people you'd like us to interview. Send them here at the War Memorial. Thank you. See you soon.